believe, to say that the attention to hydrogen and its possible role for a future energy system has never been greater. There are many reasons for this renewed attention that hydrogen is enjoying, but if I had to pick among the many reasons, I would pick two which to my mind clearly stand out. The first one is the need to integrate cheap renewable electricity into the power sector and make use of it for different applications across the entire energy sector. This is a real, tangible, near-term policy consideration that is on the top of the minds of many energy policymakers all around the world. The second reason for the renewed attention is that many governments are making their own plans right now all around the world to decarbonize their energy systems and reach net zero emissions in the long term. Some sooner, others a bit later, but sometime over the course of the next couple of decades, many governments around the world want to reach net zero emissions from the energy system, and hydrogen here is seen as a critical means for doing so, in particular for applications in heavy industry and long distance transport, but for many different applications in various different parts of energy. We from the IEA, we recently released our global roadmap for reaching net zero emissions by the year 2050 from the energy sector. It's a global roadmap that has received very, very widespread attention all around the world, and it shows a very important role for hydrogen and all those excess that can be derived from hydrogen. So all these different fuels and gases, from ammonia and its potential use in shipping to synthetic hydrocarbon fuels for the use in aviation, we have identified a large role for hydrogen moving forward. Our analysis, in fact, suggests that by 2050, for reaching a net zero emissions energy system at a global level, the use of hydrogen and hydrogen-derived fuels must be around 6 times larger than it is today. The trouble with the attention that hydrogen is receiving is that we are not yet there in terms of the market readiness of all the relevant technologies across the entire energy or hydrogen supply chains, helping bring technologies to the market and helping us all understand their potential place in the energy system is a key undertaking of the IEA's technology collaboration programs, including the hydrogen TCP. And we at the IEA, we very much enjoy the collaboration with the hydrogen TCP. It is a strategic and very fruitful exchange that we are having. I would like to thank all of you, and in particular Paul Lucchese, of course, for your support and the excellent collaboration that we've been having over the past few years. And I very much look forward to our collaboration here in the years to come. For today, my colleague José Bermúdez, who is in charge of hydrogen matters in my division, will be with you during this workshop alongside Paul Lucchese, of course. And from my perspective, I wish you all an interesting and very useful discussion at this joint workshop on power to hydrogen and hydrogen to X between the hydrogen TCP and the IEA Secretariat. Thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timur, for your kind words. We love to collaborate with the International Energy Agency for the hydrogen TCP, and we expect to keep doing so for the next following months and years to come. So thank you very much, Timur. We will move on to the next point of the agenda then. That is the presentation of the results of Task 38 on power to hydrogen and hydrogen to X of the hydrogen TCP that will be presented by our chair, Paul Lucchese. So, Paul, I will start sharing the presentation and I will make you presenter right away. You can now unmute yourself so we can all hear you and go and proceed. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So first, I want to thank IEA and especially Timur and his team for the collaboration also, because I think it's a good example of collaboration between the TCP and the IEA headquarters. My presentation will introduce what we achieved in Task 38, power to hydrogen and hydrogen 2X. And first, I will start with on the next slide with the very short presentation of the hydrogen TCP. So hydrogen TCP is one of the 39 TCP of the IEA network. We are focused, of course, on hydrogen. And we have a long story because we are created in October 77. And we were interested since that time in hydrogen. In fact, this technology collaboration program is gathering 25 countries from the different continents and 6 sponsors. You can see on the slide the countries and the sponsor. And our main goal is to develop international collaboration through projects, through tasks, we call tasks, on a different topic on hydrogen. You can see the current portfolio. And we have a lot of new projects in definition. You can see the list on the right side on renewable underground hydrogen storage, hydrogen from nuclear, hydrogen in the mining, etc., export value chain. And so we expect a lot from this new task portfolio and new collaboration. And of course, we are collaborating a lot with the other TCPs, with the IEA Paris, with the external organization, because hydrogen is not alone, is in the heart of the energy system. And so we need also external expertise to analyze the potential of hydrogen for the energy transition. So the next slide, please. So the task 38, because we give a number to the task, was carried out between 2016 and 2020. It is a project with a project organization. The topic was power to hydrogen and hydrogen 2X system analysis of the techno-economic and legal regulatory framework. In fact, it was led by and managed by CEA, my colleagues, Christine Mansilla and Olfat Lili, but unfortunately, they left for another organization last year. So I will present on behalf of them the main result on the way we organize the task. So next slide, please. This task was focused on power to hydrogen, first step. So what was the boundary of the task? In fact, we decided at the beginning that we will be interested by the hydrogen produced through electrolysis only, and electricity supplied with low carbon or low cost electricity. And we decide to include both on-grid and off-grid system or hybrid system, with a particular attention devoted to provision to service the grid and, of course, characterization of hydrogen relevance for energy storage. So it was the first part, power to hydrogen. On the next slide, you will see hydrogen 2X. And we consider, in fact, finally, in this task, all the possible application of hydrogen in transport, in natural gas grid, what we call traditionally power to gas. It could be direct injection of hydrogen or through methanation, but also power to power or any general business, power to industry, power to e-fuel, etc. So we define our scope like that. And on the next slide, this task was very successful, and the main objective at the beginning was to provide first a comprehensive understanding of the various technical and economic pathway for power to hydrogen and hydrogen 2X, to provide a comprehensive assessment of the existing legal framework, and at the end, to provide business developer and policymaker with general guidelines and recommendations. Of course, generally speaking, we want to develop more visibility. Just remind that in 2016, hydrogen was not so popular. So next slide. You will see on the next slide that this project, this task was very successful because At the end, near 60 participants were participating from different 37 organizations representing 15 countries. So compared to the other tasks, it's rather a very impressive success, this level of participation. I want to thank also the French Energy Agency, ADEME, who support and finance partially the coordination of Task 38 through funding the Technico-Economic Laboratory in CA ITZ. And so it was, I think it was a very interesting collaboration. You can see on the slide that we have both academic and industrial company. There was a very good balance. So on the next slide, just a very short overview on the structure of the task, because of course it is such a big topic that we divide in subtasks. So very quickly, and you see the name of the subtask leader. Some of them will participate to the roundtable just after. So the first one is management and strategy. Okay. The second one was very important because we analyze and we establish a database on existing demonstration project. And I will explain later the roadmap on demonstration project. The third subtask was focused on the review analysis of the existing techno-economic studies, and the same for the existing legal context. The four subtasks was focused on systematic approach and the role of hydrogen in the energy scenario. And the last task was to study new business case, original business case from for hydrogen chain at international level. So on the next slide, and oh sorry, I forgot that we have also some horizontal task force focused on definition, it's an important point, focused on data analysis, and focused on service to the grid. So next slide. So in terms of result, we had a very good production, 5 papers in international review. We participate with invited presentation in 6 international conferences, 3 technology brief, and of course the main deliverables are 2 main reports. The final report of Task 38 and the roadmap that we will explain later. So next slide, please. So the final report was released, I think, a few months ago. It's, if I remember correctly, a 200 pages report. It's available on the Hydrogen TCP website, and it's summarizing all the results we obtained in the different subtasks and task force. Of course, I will present now some results, but I have no time to present everything, so I recommend to have a look on the report. As an example of result on the task 3A, focus on the techno-economic review, a study review and business case. So we collect more than 200 papers, and my colleague from Jülich, Forschungszentrum Jülich, with the other colleagues, analyze this portfolio of studies in 2 steps. The first step to identify the relevant studies with qualitative and quantitative data, and the second step to go in deeper detail, deeper analysis on the relevant studies, and they try to analyze the tendencies of the publication, of course, the number of publications, but also, for example, the efficiency of electrolyzer, the geographical scope. You can see here that, for example, Germany published a majority of studies in this field, at least up to 2018, because we stopped the study in 2018, etc., etc. So it was a very interesting review and analysis of the papers. On the next slide. The same work with the regulatory framework. It was carried out by Francesco Dolci from GRC, and of course in Europe we have some project establishing the comparison between the different European countries, but the interest of this subtask was to add some non-European countries and to compare the different measures. For example, in some cases, you have a task benefit in some countries and not in other countries. The issue of certificate of origin, the feed-in tariff, etc. So different regulation or incentive according to the country. And we include Australia, we include Japan and US. On the next slide, and you can see, for example, other result of this subtask 3B. I think Francesco will be present in the roundtable. So, for example, Norway is the only country where electricity for electrolyzer is exempted from electricity tax, etc. And so it could lead to some recommendation to, for example, to take the best practice in some country and to recommend to implement in other countries. Of course, now this study was finished in 2019. Since 2019, so a lot of things happened, and we will probably need to update this study. So on the next slide. The subtask 4 was very interesting. I know that Sheila is there, and maybe she will complement my presentation, because at this time, in 2016-17, hydrogen was not considered in the main energy scenario. The role of hydrogen was quite zero. It was only 3 or 4 years ago. And we wonder why. And this excellent workshop organized by Sheila Samsatli at University of Bath was very interesting, because we discussed about the methodology, the tools itself, why in the tool we have no role for hydrogen, how to improve the model, etc. And it was addressed, some issue and inconsistency was addressed. And I think it was very, very interesting. You have a paper summarizing the main conclusion. And in fact, the continuation of this work is through a new task, task 41, only focused on data and modeling for hydrogen. So I think it was a very, very interesting subtask. So on the next slide, I think the next slide is focused on the case study. With our colleagues from Spain, we study some 5 original case study. You can see the case. For example, power to green ammonia for blasting industry in Chile, power to green ammonia produced in Australia and transport to Japan. Another case with waste CO2 for methanol in China. Another case in Austria. And the last one, power to hydrogen from Patagonia to Japan. So it was to estimate the different possibility of hydrogen transport, for example, with ammonia, with LOHC, with methanol, or directly if the direct product could be competitive. So on the next slide, this case study were presented in the last workshop in Spain, in Puerto Llano. And it was also a very important meeting, because we established some link between, for example, different ports in Mediterranean, and it was very, very promising case studies. On the next slide, on the task force, one was devoted to the definition, because there is nothing normalized, standardized for the definition. And we established at the beginning of the project a list of definition, power to hydrogen, hydrogen to power, etc. And after that, we connect to the Senelec organization in Europe, more specifically to the technical committee number 6. And we are now a member of the technical committee number 6. focused on hydrogen in the energy system, and it will be a very important part of the standardization effort to define the different terms in order that everyone understands the same thing. So on the next slide, the same for service to the grid, because there is a huge difference of meaning between service to the grid in Europe, in US, in Australia, and it was a very interesting work to make a comparison and to try to understand what are the difference between the service to the grid. So you could see the result in the report and the constraint to be addressed. So on the next slide, and of course, one of the major results was on the analysis of the demonstration project, but I will present in a few minutes in detail the recommendation we want to provide for the new demonstration project. So on the next slide, and as term of perspective, of course, there is some successor task. I mentioned task 41 on data and modeling, leading by IEA from Norway. We have new tasks on international trade, etc. So we have this collaboration with Sense and ELEC. And for the recommendation that I will explain in the roadmap, probably we will need also to develop new tasks or new way of collaboration to implement one or two recommendations we propose. Okay, I think I think it is the last slide. If I don't, okay. So thank you very much. It was a very interesting task, one of the most successful in the hydrogen TCP. And for more detail, I advise you to upload the full report on the website. And I think I can give the floor again to Marina for the next step. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to say all of our attendees that, as Paul said, you have this final report available at the Hydrogen TCP website. If you go to our homepage and scroll down, you will be able to see the banner with the final report with a button to download it, or you can even browse it in the website. As well, you can find more information about Task 38 or the related papers and technology briefs that Paul mentioned during this presentation in our website under Closed Activities Task 38, other relevant documents. And I just wanted to say that after this workshop, we will be creating a new blog entrance on our website where you will be able to find these presentations in PDF format to calmly take a look at them. So thank you, Paul, again for your presentation, and I will start now to the roundtable with some of the Task 38 subtask and task force leaders. They are Power-to-X experts, and they are Joris Proes from the University Catholique de Louvain, Belgium, Jonathan Lever from Unitec in New Zealand, Robert Dickinson from Hydricity Systems in Australia, and Sila Samsatli from the University of Bath in the UK. So all of you should be presenters now. I will stop these presentations so we can all see the participants of the roundtable. Thank you all for joining us today. And I will start, if I may, with the first question to Jonathan Lever on what would you say are the main needs for PTX from the version of our policymakers and our public and private investors. So Jonathan, if you can please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Marina. Apologies for my voice. I'm just recovering from a virus. I hope you can see my screen. Are
yes,
you able to
see it?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So this is a presentation about needs from policymakers and public and private investors to facilitate Power-to-X, and it covers the recommendations covered in our report. First of all, on the political aspects, that we can look at national strategies. In particular, the needs to set national targets and long-term policy signals, establish national roadmaps for critical stakeholders, boosting investor confidence by reducing uncertainty and risk, and setting ambitious GHG reduction and renewable deployment targets. Also securing ambitious private pledges that could be supported by public authorities and innovation funds. On the regulation side, it's necessary to look at trying to remove unnecessary regulatory barriers to hydrogen investments. In standardization, we know the importance of international standards bodies, especially the ISO, have in providing more certainty around hydrogen technologies. And also there's a need to establish global manufacturing standards so that for technologies such as electrolyzers, so we can provide cost reductions through economies of scale. Further political aspects that will facilitate Power-to-X incentives, foster the development of hydrogen technologies by tax breaks, subsidies or penalties on fossil fuel-based alternatives. And also we can implement carbon price to increase the profitability of low carbon hydrogen production, and also increase the profitability of hydrogen use as a substitute for fossil fuels. Promoting R&D and knowledge sharing is very important, and we know the importance of making the public aware of that hydrogen is safe to use. Coordination, also there's a need for the political environment to make sure that they can coordinate private efforts around potential local investment opportunities, and also set priorities and directions to organise strategic investment efforts, and especially in demonstration projects and knowledge sharing. I'd like to talk a little bit about specific pathway needs very quickly. On power to hydrogen.
Jonathan, one quick thing. We are
Yes.
not changing the slide, and we are not sure if this is the right presentation we're seeing. So structures 1, analysis of trusses.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. You should be okay. I'm not sharing the correct screen. Let's see.
If you can just answer by voice, and if you agree, I could share the presentation through our blog entrance in PDF format, so people have this information afterwards.
Okay. I'm very sorry about that.
It's okay, it happens.
I will continue. So on power to hydrogen, it's necessary to have low carbon electricity, which is needed if you're going to have low carbon hydrogen, obviously. There are needs to promote renewable energy penetration, where hydrogen can serve to avoid curtailment of excess electricity by providing grid balancing services and facilitate green gas, green chemical and green fuel. Subsidise electrolyzers, implement carbon pricing, and a very important one is to internalise externalities in business cases to reduce harmful emissions and environmental damage. Hydrogen 2X, there are needs to foster sector-specific measures to by implementing standards and or incentives during the transition. For hydrogen to power, need to penalise fossil peak electricity generation, as hydrogen may be the only way to produce electricity during peak hours and hence contribute to the stability of the electricity system during so-called stress hours. For hydrogen to gas, there are needs for incentives for injection into the natural gas networks, which will need government support in order to promote market penetration. There's a need to require it for accounting for natural gas leakages. There's also a clear target needed for hydrogen blending concentration in the gas grid. Standards are needed for high concentrations of hydrogen in the natural gas pipeline systems. For those, I see comments coming through. Unfortunately, you can't see my presentation at the moment. There's a need also for system of guarantees of origin for hydrogen to stimulate the use of renewable gases, and also foster the development of green gas feed-in tariffs for hydrogen or synthetic methane, and finally in hydrogen to gas, a quota system to foster H2 to gas applications. Finally, in hydrogen to industry, well actually there's two more. Hydrogen to industry, there's a need for stronger environmental constraints on the sulfur content or the carbon footprint of industry activities, and also implementing certificates, subsidies and penalties to ensure a level playing field for green hydrogen. And final two are hydrogen to fuels, H2 and synthesis fuels. There's a need for a clear strategic roadmap leading to the realization of pledged targets, incentives that include vehicles, trains, ships and infrastructure, need for vehicle fee baits and fee exemptions, along with access to dedicated zero emission or low emission vehicle and bus lanes. Again, the impact of carbon pricing, and also be very helpful to have quotas for fuel shares, particularly aviation shipping, for instance, to boost the use of synthesized fuels that initiate economies of scale. And finally, hydrogen to heat, subsidies, feed-in tariffs and premiums, and also setting standards or targets such as the concentration of hydrogen in the natural gas grid, or the modalities of potential hydrogen participation in the electricity reserve market. We're also helpful to ensure that policies for industry and gas and power sectors are adapted to the regional context. I apologize you can't see my presentation, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for your insights. And we would like to excuse and please accept our apologies for the inconveniences to all attendees. But if Jonathan could please share the presentation with me, I will make sure that we will make it available in the blog entrance that we are about to post after this workshop in our website. So the oral attendees could have access to this information afterwards there. So we will be moving to the next question that is for Joris Proust. What do you think, Joris, would be the needs, or what about the future project promoters and project managers? What would you recommend them to focus on, or how to tackle new PTX projects?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I will be much more on a high level with only 2 slides. Let me first say that actually when we started this task 38, 2016, the world was still a little bit different with respect to hydrogen. And so I think that we have to admit that at that time, maybe the X was also an indication of we are not really sure where we're going to use the hydrogen. So the X might be a way to indicate a lot of applications, but also a way of saying we are not sure yet where it will be beneficial or where it can be used. And I think that also through the interaction with the IEA office in Paris, and especially through the energy technology perspectives and the other report, The Future of Hydrogen, which comes from the IEA, I think we have had a much clearer view about this X. And so this is a plot that I taken directly from the energy technology perspectives, where the X has been quantified, not only in terms of million tons of hydrogen per year, but also in terms of the markets and the different developments that are still needed. I think you are quite familiar already with these different X's, but it's important to recognize that in the 5 years between the start of the task 38, I think we have had a much clearer view of what the X could be. And so you see the different applications and the time frames that come with that. And I think that the importance of having an identification of the future X uses that we can hope for also gives you a good perspective of the amounts of hydrogen that we need to produce. So here you can clearly see that in order to reply or to respond to this future use and demand, I think that we all can agree that we will need both the green and the blue hydrogen. And I think that maybe in the beginning the power was more concentrating, or the power to X was more concentrating on the green hydrogen. But in the meantime, we all recognize that in order to satisfy the needs on the demand side, we will also need part of this hydrogen to be blue, meaning coming from fossil sources, SMR with CCUS. I think this is a very important point, because we all know that renewable electricity will be probably available at a reasonable price, but there are still, let's say, capacity limits. And I think the 10% use of the renewable energy for dedicated green hydrogen production is a number that comes back in a lot of reports. And this kind of puts you already a limit on the amount of green hydrogen that will be available. And so also the complement that we need to provide with blue hydrogen. And so with respect to the question, power to X, future power to X projects, what should they maybe concentrate or consider much more than they have been doing in the past? and this is a very personal reflection as a chemical engineer, I think there should be a part of the effort should be in the beginning already answering the question, are we going to use green or are we to use blue hydrogen in our application? And I think it's much more a matter of colors. It's not just a color preference, but it is also more a realization about the intrinsic difference between the green and the blue hydrogen. And I think there are two major points that might decide whether to use green or blue. The first is, of course, the fact that green hydrogen is much more appropriate for a decentralized production. So any application that has a decentralized production, like a hydrogen refueling station, might be more appropriate to use green hydrogen. And the second, and this is probably a much more forgotten aspect, is that more on the chemical side, green hydrogen is also intrinsically much more pure. So if you have intrinsically production of hydrogen from an electrolyzer, you arrive at 99.995% of hydrogen. Of course, you can also reach the same kind of purity levels with the blue hydrogen after SMR, but this requires an additional step. So if you look at the blue hydrogen, the SMR, the water shift, and then the pressure swing absorption, there is an additional effort required to make the blue hydrogen on the same purity level as the green hydrogen. And this is something that you need to consider also for the applications. And the other thing is, for instance, that blue hydrogen is a gas that will soar out of the reactor at a higher temperature. Green hydrogen is a gas that comes out of the reactor at a much lower temperature. And so from a personal reflection, if you look at the production side, the amount of blue and green hydrogen, and on the other hand, the different applications, you can kind of come, and this is a very high level thing, you can kind of come with a proposition where you look at the different applications. And so, for instance, for the power sector, for firing gas turbines, I would argue as a chemical engineer that there is really not a need to burn up a very high purity green hydrogen in a gas turbine, and this is something that you can do with blue hydrogen. On the other hand, there are a lot of applications that go to transport, direct use in fuel cell driven vehicles. For that application, you do need the high purity of the green hydrogen, so this is something that I would locate in the green hydrogen. And then, for instance, other applications, and we don't have the time to go into this, but for instance, ammonia production, this is something that can largely benefit from a higher purity hydrogen, because that will expand the lifetime of the catalyst, chemically speaking. And so there is also a driving force that allows this process to be at low temperature when you use green hydrogen. Syn fuel production, for instance, is something that will need both hydrogen and CO2. And so you can ask yourself, is this really intelligent in view of the limited amount of green hydrogen to use electrolytic hydrogen for syn fuel production, knowing that we do need a CO2 source? There are also ways to incorporate such kind of processes within SMR, where you can tune the hydrogen CO2 ratio. So I think that with the future, and this is my conclusion, when you go to power to X, maybe you have to ask yourself upfront, are we going to use green or blue hydrogen in this process? Because this will have implications also in the way this process is being tuned and the way logistics are important for this application. So this is what I want to end with from my side, and then I leave the floor to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joris. As well, if you can pass me this presentation and you agree, we can make it available in the blog entrance in our website. So we will be moving to the next question, that is, which hydrogen to X application or pathway needs more R&D focus in the next couple of years, and why? I would like both Sheila and Rob to answer this question, as they may have opposed views. So please, Sheila, go ahead. Sarah,
thank you, Marina.
That's your thought.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, the most important hydrogen application that we need to focus on is the hard-to-abate, energy-intensive industries such as steel, cement, petrochemicals, especially plastics, so fertilizers such as ammonia and aluminium. So these are responsible for 22% of global CO2 emissions, and we will not be able to achieve our net zero targets if we don't decarbonize these sectors. So if you step outside and look around, you'll see steel, concrete, and plastics everywhere you look. So we need to make sure that these resources are produced with minimal CO2 emissions if we are to achieve a true net zero. So steel is used in wind turbines, chassis and body panels of electric or fuel cell vehicles, solar panels, heat pumps, and so on. Essentially, in all technologies, we will need to achieve net zero. So in terms of using hydrogen, we need to prioritize the hard-to-abate sectors, because this is where we can achieve the largest CO2 abatement per unit cost. So for example, using 1 ton of hydrogen to produce steel will abate 26 tons of CO2, whereas using the same 1 ton of hydrogen for mobility only abates 6 or 7 tons of CO2, and it's lower for other sectors. So this is where we can get the biggest impact for the money spent. Also, one can argue that other sectors have other options for decarbonization. So for example, heat pumps for the heating sector and electric vehicles for mobility. However, it is very challenging to electrify completely some industries. So for example, in steelmaking, hydrogen direct reduction is one of the promising alternatives for decarbonization. Similarly, the cement industry, which uses large amounts of heat, is less suitable for electric heating than using hydrogen. So my next point is that to start and grow the hydrogen market, we need large and reliable demands. So currently, there is very little take-up of hydrogen vehicles and possibly even less for hydrogen heating in homes. Whereas switching industries to hydrogen will very quickly create a large demand for green hydrogen, which will encourage many producers to enter the market. So this would then make it easy for green hydrogen to trickle down to other sectors. So there are challenges that we need to overcome for this to happen. So the first challenge is to do with time. So these energy-intensive industries have long investment cycles, and we may think that 2050 is a long way away, but not so for these industries. So for example, blast furnaces for steelmaking and other major equipment items have very long lifetimes. So if we need to replace now, then we want them to be replaced with net zero technologies, or they will be locked into the conventional fossil fuel technologies. So it is crucial to act now.
Perfect.
Then
Thank
there
you
is
very
the
much.
Okay, so then there is the issue of carbon leakage. So steel is traded globally and the profit margins are not very large. So the profitability is very sensitive to electricity prices and policy. So for example, CO2 prices. So it is an existential challenge for these industries. So it's not a matter of thriving or not, but one of survival. So we have to be careful in setting policies so that we don't kill our industries here and force the production to move to other countries with less stringent rules or emission. Okay, so finally, the last challenge is capacity. So if we are going to decarbonize hard to abate sectors with green hydrogen, then we will need large amounts of renewable electricity. So we will need to build more wind turbines and solar farms, and we will need higher electrolyzer capacities. So the current maximum electrolyzer capacity is around 10 to 20 megawatts. So we need to do something about this. So I'm in discussion with Hydrogen TCP Secretariat, so with Marina and Andrea, about a new task that will focus on hydrogen value chains for decarbonizing hard to abate sectors. So this will be task 42. So I'll give you more details about this when I answer the next question. So I'll hand over to Rob.
Perfect. Thank you, Sila. So same question for Rob.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, literally, with everything Sheila said. I'm not sure about 42 because I'm still in definition, but anyways, yeah, here in Australia, a new collaboration research centre called the HILT for heavy industry low carbon abatement is just got up yesterday. It's very exciting and it's very closely aligned with what Sheila just described. Marina, I'm not sure if you're able to put up in the blog on the side a link to the PDF. Yeah, leave that there. To a link to the 4-page PDF. If not, then the attendees can get it later. Yeah, in short.
Yeah, we will post it later in the blog. And
later, okay. So in short, you'll get a short document that has talks about the need for talking about the viability of electrolyzers being much more than just the cost of electricity, and that what's new and exciting, especially for all the IEA people in the audience, about hydrogen is it's an entirely new market because you've got power to fuel and fuel to power. Like historically, the 20th century was based on fuel to power. So what does that mean for how we model energy markets, especially electricity markets? So this short video, it only goes for 43 seconds once Marina hits play, but
The first part one, is conventional one-way dispatch, which happens around the world, based on generator side price bid stack. So the operators dispatch generation until it matches demand. And what I proposed to my colleagues across the entire energy market operation here in Australia is to have, in the long term, post 2025 and certainly into 2030, a two-sided market. So you'll see how that works in a moment. So Marina, hit play, please, and I'll provide a short commentary as it goes along. Thanks. So this is one-way market. This is this is how the system has worked since the 21st century, since the late 20th century. And this is happening in a few seconds in the real world. So every 5 minutes, that's what happens. Now, this is what, just hit pause for a second, Marina. So, thank you. Yeah, now we're going to see what happens in a two-way market. And again, this is going to happen over a period of seconds at the beginning of each 5-minute period. But you'll see that what happens in the beginning is dispatching generation to match demand. But then when power fuels comes along, we can keep on going. So yeah, hit play, please, Marina. Thank you. Excellent. So we can get down to near zero operational demand, and that's already happened in South Australia. So to deal with near zero demand, everything works. If you just have an inverted power price stack for power fuels, so it's demand. So generation side is the generator is expressing a willingness to buy. Willingness to sell. And on the power fuels side, it's an expression of a willingness to buy. So once those are matched, the first part is matching demand, just megawatts. The second part is matching price. So as soon as the prices match at a horizontal level, then what's left in the residual, so the generators that are priced too high don't get to dispatch, and the power fuels that are priced too low, not willing to buy, don't get to buy anything. So it just works. And as you'll see from the handout, we've got price dynamics modeling that just extends the existing system to make the system work. So it looks more complicated at first, but it's really not that complicated. So questions later, I guess.
Thank you. We have the last question. So finally, I would like to all of you to please, in 1 or 2 sentences, tell us how would you describe working in a TCP task, especially in this one, in task 38, to our audience. Were there any highlights? What do you take home from this international collaborative experience? So I will do the same order here. So Jonathan, if you can.
Well, it's been very beneficial for me coming from a small country like New Zealand. And this is one of the benefits of working on an international task, is that the knowledge can be shared, across the globe. Also, the contacts that you make obviously are extremely valuable for ongoing work. So overall, yeah, very, very beneficial. And the knowledge that I've received, I've also, managed to pass on to many of my colleagues, as well as sharing some contacts.
Perfect. Joris, what's your take?
Yes, I think, and this is very personal, my main occupation, let's say, is being a university professor, and so teaching and research. But if you have some ambition at some point in your career to also look at a more broader perspective, the global market, making sure that what you are doing is still relevant, I think the TCP is a very condensed and efficient way to be involved and get a lot of information from experts around in a very short time. And then it also forces you to do this exercise yourself. It's much more beneficial to do this in a group effort. And I think when, like in the field of hydrogen, during the course of this work, there is also an additional support and interaction with the IEA office itself. It makes it even much more rewarding and makes it much more relevant on the level what you are doing. So I think that the TCP itself has a relevance as such. And whenever it can be coupled to the IEA due to the circumstances that make it a very lively topic, I think this really is a very, very rewarding experience.
Thank you very much, Joris. What about you, Sila?
Yeah, so I have the same experience as Juris and Jonathan. So I had a really positive experience working in Task 38. So for me, my highlights are meeting many experts from many different countries who are now long-term collaborators. So also meeting like-minded people who are really passionate about hydrogen, like Paul Lucchese, who led this task, and all of the other expert contributors in Task 38, and meeting Marina and Andrea, whose organizational skills are top-notch. So as I mentioned, I'm putting together a new task, so Task 32, which I have already discussed with Marina and Andrea. So I will give you the proposal very soon for this, Marina and Andrea, so you can present it to the executive committee. So if any of you here is interested in contributing to this new task on hydrogen value chains to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors, then please get in touch with us. So we will take a holistic approach, including taxonomies, definitions, technological options and pathways, opportunities and challenges, markets and regulations, and other aspects of the whole value chain. And we welcome participation from experts from all disciplines related to this.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sheila. Lastly, Robert.
Yeah, it's a super interesting experience for me, because at the very beginning in 2016, 2017, when we were allowed to travel and there was no COVID around, it was really cool to have to be able to meet people in Europe. Oh, wait, yeah, it was exclusively Europe. Yeah, but as others have said, collaborators from around the world, it's really hard from Australia. Like, one of the funny things that I always said at the end of every meeting was, where are we going to have the next meeting? And I'd put my hand up and say, how about Australia? And I was always laughing because no one's going to come to Australia because it's too expensive for relative to just jumping in a train and going from UK to Paris or whatever. So yeah, that's the good side. And then we got into COVID, and that kind of pulled the rug out from under that. But so, which is a real bummer. But on the other hand, it's a really good experience of showing that we here down under, we're in a different time zone and halfway around the world, that way and that way, that we can collaborate quite effectively using these tools that we're using right now. So yeah, I see going forwards these tools dominating what we do over the course of a year, and maybe just having one or two transcontinental travel experiences. And it'd be really good to have Canada and the US jump in as well. Canada's become has rejoined recently, and the US is on the way. So hopefully, yeah, by the time Task 41 is finished, maybe we'll have some modeling from there as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert.
Excellent.
So, were you done, or sorry, I just got in.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
No, that was faded away. Sorry.
Great. So I would like to thank you all for your participation today in the roundtable, or of course for your valuable inputs to Task 38. I would like to encourage all of our experts here today connected to this workshop. If you want to take a look at our open task or task in definition, if you are interested in any of them, you will have joint task forms, or if you haven't or need more information, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. You will see as well, whenever we have the preliminary proposal for this new task on value chains to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors through hydrogen that Sila commented. If you are right now interested by the topic, you can reach out to us and we will keep you updated. Otherwise, keep posted and check our task in definitions. You will see it out there very soon. I would like to say that I hope travel will come back soon, and do not lose hope, Robert, that I hope someday we will visit Australia.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you in person. I met three people on the screen, and Paul, that's all. Anyway, yeah, cool.
So we have some questions in the chat. We are now in the Q&A session. So you can all ask questions both to the speakers of the roundtable and to Paul Lucchese on the results from Task 38. So I see that some of the questions were already answered through the chat, but I see another one here from Nigel Holmes on, will the user uptake of green or blue hydrogen be determined by cost per kilogram as long as it meets minimum purity? I believe this was during Joris' presentation, so if you can answer.
Yes, thank you. So actually a few chats later, I gave a first tentative answer to Mr. Holmes already. And then he, I think he rightly replied in the end that actually, of course, the difference between theory and practice, I fully agree. And I understand that this is a very subtle issue, and it definitely needs to be looked on. I only try to give some arguments, again, from a chemical engineering perspective, that green and blue hydrogen should not be taken on the same level, because there are some really intrinsic differences, chemically speaking, and I think that this is something that is maybe not realized on a sufficiently well understood level. And so looking at for instance, from my own experience, if you do some treatments, for instance, during glass production, the fact that you use a different kind of hydrogen might give you a more clear glass, for instance. So there are some subtle issues that might just give you the appetite, the investor appetite, to go into that direction. And the main driving force for that, again, is the fact that we do need to, let's say, consider that there is only a limited amount of green hydrogen available on a worldwide level. And so you can imagine to do some trading, but in the end, it's a global, it's a global restriction. And so I think that in the IEA report, this was rightly and correctly put up front, that should not forget about the availability of the chemical hydrogen, the blue hydrogen with the CCUS. And so this means that I think before even thinking of using the green hydrogen, we should really be very careful in already trying to identify upfront the applications where this green hydrogen is going to be used. Because if this has some implications on the processes that come afterwards, we will have to do some adaptations and some retrofittings in chemical installations on the long term. So this is, I think, a critical issue to be addressed right now, to make sure that we use the limited available quantities of green hydrogen for the right applications. And then, of course, the matter of theory and practice and business opportunities and appetite is something that will have to follow. Yeah, I think that is maybe another aspect that I can bring into that discussion.
Perfect, Joris, thank you. We have another question for Sila. So he wonders whether large-scale storage or small-scale storage distributed, which one of them will contribute the most to uptake of power to hydrogen?
Yeah, so both of them will contribute, so they will have roles to play, especially for green hydrogen, because green hydrogen, as we all know, we need renewable energy to produce that, and renewable energy, they are variable or intermittent. So we will need to store them at some point. So we have done several studies on this, so looking at large-scale storage alongside small-scale distributed, and amongst the many scenarios that we run, we are seeing that it will be a combination of both. So we may have to use both. So salt caverns and depleted oil and gas fields in where they are available, we may have to use them, and they will be complemented by small scale storage, such as say pressurized vessels. So storing hydrogen in pressurized vessels. There are also other choices. So for example, the use of other energy carriers, so other medium to carry hydrogen. So ammonia has been mentioned already. But definitely for green hydrogen, storage, whether it's large scale or small scale, will have roles to play.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sheila. I don't see any further questions through the chat. However, if you come up with other questions, you can still ask them through the chat. We have a second round of question and answer that is meant for the second block, but these speakers can answer your questions through the chat. So I would like to take the time and thank you all again, all the speakers from our first block, and to encourage all of attendees to take a look at the Hydrogen TCP, learn more about our task and definition. And if you're interested, join a task. As you have seen, here are experts. They highly recommend the experience. So you will be able to network and connect with like-minded people that will become long-term connections and collaborators. You will be able to travel when COVID allows us to do so to other places and share your knowledge in a worldwide ambience. So thank you very much all. We will be moving to the next block of the agenda. The first slot, the first presenter would be José Bermúdez, Energy Analyst for Hydrogen and Alternative Fuels of the International Energy Agency, who will be presenting us the role of power to hydrogen and hydrogen to X in the energy system from the International Energy Agency perspective. So, José, please give me 1 minute. We will give you presenter rights right away. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself, put your camera on, and share your slides at any time.
Okay, so I think now I have the camera and the micro on, that's right?
Yes.
Okay, but thank you very much, Marina. Good afternoon, everyone here from Paris. Really thank you for the invitation. And let me start with an apology because I have just moved office for today for a little problem. So I have 3 screens. I will try not to mess this up while I put the presentation on, but please stop me at any time if things are not working. So I guess that you are now seeing the presentation, or I will hope.
Yes, it works perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So let me click here. So there you go. Well, I think I'm going to repeat some of the messages that Timur gave today on his initial address to the workshop, but I think it's a message that we need to keep putting ahead in every presentation and in every event that we go, no? So that hydrogen is going to be a important element of the future of our energy system. We know that we are facing an unprecedented transformation on the energy system, and the versatility of hydrogen is attracting a lot of interest and from many different stakeholders. And we are thinking about renewable electricity suppliers, electricity and gas utilities, automakers, oil and gas companies, and especially governments as well, where because they see an element as part of their long-term energy transition and their energy strategies. The reason is that hydrogen has the potential to overcome several of the challenges that the energy system is facing in this transformation. It can help us to create much larger amounts of variable renewable energy, which will be required to be deployed at really large scales in the next few years if we want to put the system into a pathway of full decarbonization, and whose availability is not always well matched with the demands. So hydrogen can help in deploying larger amounts of renewable energy, thanks to being a promising low-cost option for storing electricity over long periods of time, and more importantly, to allow sector coupling to those applications where electricity may not be able to reach directly. It offers a way to decarbonize many of these sectors I mentioned, and we can think about the iron and steel sector, chemical production, where it already plays an important role, long-haul transport, shipping, aviation. So these sectors where reducing emission is proving meaningfully, or to reduce meaningfully those emissions is proving particularly difficult. Also, we know that hydrogen can be produced from all sorts of sources of energy, so from renewables, from nuclear, from fossil fuels, and it can be used directly, or it can be transformed in other hydrogen-derived fuels. So this is actually very beneficial from the point of view of energy security, which you may know is one of the main areas of work for the IEA. We all know that there have been over false starts on hydrogen, but we are quite sure that this time is going to be different, as long as we are able to address some challenges that need to be overcome, basically the cost of producing low carbon hydrogen, so no hydrogen but low carbon hydrogen, the need for developing infrastructures that can deliver this hydrogen to its end users, and some regulatory barriers that may prevent the adoption of hydrogen technologies. So as Timur mentioned as well, we have recently released our new net zero by 2050 roadmap, which is the first comprehensive roadmap on how we can put the world on this pathway to reach net zero emissions by 2050, with the objective of establishing a chain of milestones and tasks that we need to address and to put in place if we really want to reach this goal. Obviously, in this transition towards net zero emission, hydrogen plays a critical role in facilitation emission reductions in those sectors that I have just mentioned, and this is clearly reflected on the growth of demand. So as we can see from the graph, the demand for hydrogen can be pushed by 6 times by 2050, especially in new applications. So it will keep growing in those traditional applications where it is already in use, but especially new applications such as power generation, using new industrial applications, in buildings and in transport, both in the form of hydrogen itself and on the form of hydrogen-derived fuels. Moreover, if we think about the role that hydrogen can have in what is the delivery of energy and the final energy consumption, hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels could account for up to 13% of global final energy consumption by 2050, which is a significant increase from today when it meets less than 1% of this demand. The hydrogen and its derived fuels should become important options to decarbonize long distance transport. So in aviation, in shipping, in trucks, we can see that ammonia can account for around 45% of the global energy demand in shipping. It can also help in power generation by co-firing with coal, or by pure production for purchase of ammonia in power generation, to provide flexibility to the system. Synthetic kerosene can meet around 1/3 of global aviation demand by 2050. And hydrogen will feature strongly in industry. So in the chemical industry, we can expect that it could reach up to 40% of the demand from around 20% today. Or in iron and steel, it can reach around 20%, especially if we manage to introduce the direct reduced iron steel production. But this transformation is not only about the demand of hydrogen, it's also about how we produce that hydrogen, which is the main topic of discussion today. So by 2050, we have to make sure that practically all the production of hydrogen is based on low carbon technology. So in water electrolysis and in the use of fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage, or other potential routes that may arise in the future, such as natural gas pyrolysis or production from bioenergy. In our net zero emission scenario, electrolysis accounts for around 60% of this demand, growing from what today is practically an anecdotic role, so way less than 0.1% of global production of hydrogen. For that, electrolysis will absorb close to 15,000 terawatt-hour every year, which will be roughly a fifth of global electricity consumption in 2050. But for putting in perspective, it will be equivalent to half of today's electricity demand. So you can imagine that half of the electricity production in the world today would be dedicated to hydrogen if we want to reach net zero emissions according to our roadmap. To give you another data on how important or how linked the role of Power-to-X is to climate ambitions. The flagship scenario typically on the IEA has been the Sustainable Development Scenario, aiming to reach net zero emissions by 2070. Sorry. And when we compare the deployment on that scenario with the deployment that we get in the net zero scenario, the results are impressive. So the demand the capacity additions on electrolysis grow by 6 times by 2030 when we compare it to scenarios, and nearly triple by 2050. So according to our pathway, we will need to deploy 800 gigawatts of electrolysis by 2030. This is impressive when one thinks that we have less than 300 megawatts today on dedicated production from electrolysis. But it is difficult, but it's not undoable. And this is a message that we also want to put in place. So we have already in the pipeline under development projects that could deliver more than 100 gigawatts by 2030. And I think the important message that we can say here is that it's difficult, but it's doable, and we just need to repeat the level of ambition and deployment that we are seeing today on solar energy, on solar photovoltaics, for example. Obviously, this will not happen if we don't see a significant drop in the cost of how we produce hydrogen. We need to close the gap between producing hydrogen with traditional unabated fossil routes and clean routes such as electrolysis. We need to scale up electrolysis to unlock economies of scale up their deployment as well, not only the manufacturing. We need to see continued decrease on the renewable energy generation costs. And this is particularly important considering that the cost of electricity can make up to 80% of the total cost of producing electric hydrogen. But in our net zero scenario is something that happens because as we unlock this, especially these economies of scale, not only on hydrogen but also on the renewable generation production, we see that electrolysis can become soon a competitive way of producing hydrogen, even by 2030 with other low carbon routes like natural gas with CCUS. And in certain regions of the world, it can become competitive also with abated fossil routes, and it could even be the cheapest way of producing hydrogen in the long term. We cannot say that we are nearly there, but we are on the way of getting there. And for getting there, we really need a lot of innovation, and I think this is something of particular interest in this forum today. The story of success of hydrogen is a story of innovation. We know that not all the steps of the low carbon hydrogen value chain are operating at commercial scale today. Among the low carbon production routes, concretely electrolysis, has reached certain level of maturity, but it's at quite early stages of adoption, and we need the markets to keep scaling up so it can get to mature markets. But a lot of this maturation will come from innovation that can decrease precious metal loads, and that can improve efficiencies, that can increase stack lifetimes so that the costs keep decreasing and the technology can become more competitive. Finally, just as a taster, because I think I will discuss this a bit more detail on Marina, I wanted to give you a little idea of what is next on the IEA work on Power-to-X and on hydrogen in general, but obviously from now on, every time that we speak about hydrogen, Power-to-X will be there. The next big thing that we have on the pipeline and currently on the developing, and hopefully if things work well, will go out tomorrow for peer review, is our global hydrogen review. This is the first time that we are going to publish a global hydrogen review, and it's expected to build on the work that we have been doing on hydrogen in general, and to assess actual progress on the ground and compare it with government ambitions and with our long-term scenarios to suggest and to provide recommendations on how we can close this gap on what is really happening and what we need to happen on the hydrogen sector to be able to play its role in the clean energy transition. The report will be released late September, early October 2021. The other two big things that we have on the pipeline are the Tracking Clean Energy Progress Program, concretely the page on hydrogen, which will be delivered or released during the autumn 2021, and our Clean Energy Technology Guide, which was an analytical tool that we released last year with the clean energy technology perspectives. And that we are planning from now on to keep updates so we can properly track progress on these critical clean energy technologies such as water electrolysis. And this is all on my side. Once again, I want to thank the Hydrogen TCP for the invitation, and definitely looking forward for further collaboration with the Hydrogen TCP, which is an absolutely critical asset for the work that we are doing at the IEA. So thank you very much, Marina.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jose, for your presentation. I would like to remind our attendees that if you have any question for Jose, you can ask it through the chat, and we will come back to it at the second slot for Q&A. After the presentations from Paul Lucchese, and afterwards the presentation of strategic activities on Power-to-X activities, both at the IEA and the Hydrogen TCP. So thank you, Jose, again. I will now invite Paul to start the presentation on...
Yes.
I will start, yeah, 1 second.
Yeah.
Please let me know when you see the slides.
Paul, we can hear a lot of background noise.
It's coming.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, now it's okay for me. Okay, thank you. So I will present you a quite new thing, because the roadmap report is released today, and we are very happy to present you the main result of the roadmap report. Most of my colleagues don't know what's it inside, because we finished the work in the last months, mainly with Sebastian Rivas and Olfa Tlili from the CEA Techno-Economic Institute ITZ, and myself, and with the support of Secretariat. And we finish the work in the last weeks. So I am very happy to present you some new things, even for my Task 38 colleagues. They will discover some new things. So next slide, please. So the target of the roadmap is focused only on the demonstration project. Is a more limited scope than the Task 38. It's focused on demonstration project, and the idea was to identify the bottlenecks, and to prevent overlapping demonstration effort, and to identify the next step in terms of demo project. So in this sense, it's addressing the third objective of the Task 38, to provide business developer and policymaker with general guidelines and recommendation. So next slide. So as I said, the report is released today. It will be available on the website too. You can see the cover of the report, the new cover, and you can see the outline of the report. In fact, there is 3 main parts. The first part is a deep analysis. What do we know with the existing demonstration project? I will explain later in detail. The second part is what is missing, what needs to be done. And the third part is a summary of main recommendation. On the next slide, so general consideration. So in fact, we analyze 300 demonstration projects. The first demonstration project from a historical point of view was launched in the 80s by Germany, but in fact, the Power-to-X ID concept emerged mainly from 10 years only. Before 2010, we didn't speak about power-to-gas, power-to-X. It's just for the last 10 years, with the connected to the idea of the excess of renewables. In fact, there is an acceleration of the demonstration project deployment. You can see on the figures that from the last 5 years, there is an impressive growth in the demonstration project. And finally, for the last 2 years, there is a true turning point, because I will explain later, because we are going now from demonstration to early stage of commercial project, and we are shifting to the commercial aspect. But it's very recent. It's only from the last 2 years. And in fact, to achieve this analysis, we establish a database, a very comprehensive database. Each project is characterized by 40 parameters, technical parameters, economic parameters, project detail analysis, etc. And of course, it's a very interesting database. And the second thing is we analyze from this database, we analyze the project according to different dimensions, the maturity aspects, the geographical analysis, the pathway, the technology use, the size of the project, and the cost of demo project. So I will give you some result on that. And for example, in one slide, but I will detail after, in one slide, I give you some general result. Yes, on the next slide, please, Marina. Of course, the number of projects, as I said before, we can observe a dramatic increase of the number of projects, and also on the size of project. I will not detail all the graph, but you can see the number on the figure, but just give the conclusion. And now we are going to early adoption project. That means commercial project. Even the price of hydrogen is too costly, but it's the aim of the project now are to sell hydrogen, not like the most of the demonstration project. So the maturity of project, we are very clearly going from proof of concept 5 or 10 years ago to early adoption on system level integration. Pathway. At the beginning, we observe only project focused on power to power, a lot of projects at the beginning of power to power, power to H2 for mobility, and power to gas. And now, since the last 3-4 years, we observe a shift to power to industry and to chemical and e-fuel. Grid connected, evolution from off-grid, because at the beginning, most of the projects were off-grid, to on-grid or hybrid project, combining renewable and on-grid. On technology, alkaline technology represents 2/3 of the project, on PEM only 1/3. On energy evolution, interesting result, because we make some analysis and we observe no improvement of efficiency during this year. So, okay, it was just a matter of size. And of course, in terms of objectives, we can observe a shift from technical objective to more economic objective. So it's a global view of the analysis we carried out, but I will give some details in some specific case. So next slide, please. Maturity evolution. It's a very interesting topic, because you can see on the slide, the blue color, we observe since 2 years, some, of course, a shift from demonstration to commercial project, and according to the size of the project. And you can see on the slide the scale of a project according to the IEA classification, from proof of concept to early adoption or commercial. I will come back after, because it's a very interesting approach. On the next slide, demo project cost analysis, also a very interesting result. In fact, we were very surprised by the fact that there is a huge dispersion of cost for the small size project below 1 megawatt. And it was very surprising because for the same size of project, same application, same thing, we can observe, because it's a logarithmic scale, we can observe a range between 1 and 20 or 30 for the same size. On the contrary, we can observe convergence for the larger project. And it's very interesting to see in the table that we are converging to a cost of €1, 1 watt for the large project. We observe, for example, for the most costly project, up to $600 per watt, compared to for the large project, $1 per watt. So we can raise some issue on that and to raise if it's not a funding opportunities rather than based on real cost. So and it's an issue for the public money. From the geographical analysis, most of the projects were implemented in Europe, at least until 2016, and we can observe a slight evolution to new projects in other continents since 2 or 3 years. There is no clear link with national strategy, only there is a clear link with the funding opportunities rather than geographical synergies. And of course, what we can observe that, in fact, the link between the project could be established through the big company, because the big company, energy company, are present in different projects in different countries, and maybe they could benefit from the feedback of the project rather than the local company or the local stakeholders. Okay, I will go to the next slide. In terms of pathway, I mentioned before that we are going now a little more to power to industry, power to e-fuel. And for example, inside the power to gas, we can observe, maybe it's not very clear on the slide, but we can observe a shift from power to hydrogen to power to methane with methanation step. It's very clear for the last 3 years. But generally speaking, for the pathway about power to gas, power to hydrogen, and power to power, we notice a huge degree of redundancy between the project and the lack of synergies and the lack of sharing knowledge on this topic. On the next slide. So as a conclusion of the analysis, we can say that the projects are very European country-centered, a lot of redundancy, okay, a huge variety of cost, and a shift from technical objective to economical objective. And the regulatory issue finally can be addressed only with relatively large size project. On the next slide. So I put on the slide some food from different people from big company, very interesting. For example, from Total Hydrogen in last month, they said, Adamo Crunchy, we don't need any demonstration project, we need to scale up. The same from Catherine McGregor, from the CEO of ENGIE. We must focus now on demonstration project, but with the whole value chain. That means that it's more early adoption project and not demonstration. And we need to avoid overlapping. And the same for Mathieu Guillard from Air Liquide. We must avoid to repeat endlessly pilot project. We must take care of good usage of public funding and concentrate on competitiveness of hydrogen production. So it's a very interesting input. And so on the next slide, finally, what is missing according to our conclusion? First, we think that we need to focus now not on demonstration project, but on early stage project, on the whole value chain integrated with the ecosystem, and all value chain means size above 10 megawatt at least. I will show that this priority is integrated in some country roadmap like Denmark and Germany. In Denmark, they call the project value chain project. In Germany, they call a living lab project. So, but it's the same thing. So first thing to focus not on demonstration, but more on all value chain with relatively large size. Second, for the demonstration project, to focus on non-covered technology. For example, we notice a lack of demonstration projects for solid oxide electrolyzer. So we probably in the next decade we will need to deploy some demonstration project with a high temperature electrolyzer or other technology not covered. More project on power to industry, power to e-fuel, because it was very recently that this project were deployed. And finally, more project on non-European countries, but with the condition that we have to organize a share of knowledge on technology transfer. I put on the slide an example of a solid oxide electrolyzer demonstration project, Multiply, so in Rotterdam. So it's an example, but I think we need to multiply this type of project and not to repeat on with PEM on or alkaline electrolyzer, for example. On the next slide, just to illustrate that in some national strategy, it's integrated. For example, I take the very interesting PTX Danish strategy. And in the PTX Danish strategy, they said we need to support 2, 3, or 4 value chain projects. Each project is about 100 megawatt or 200 megawatt, so it's not a demonstration project, but it's a very important step to go to production support. And in total, they will fund the project up to 500 megawatt. So it's a very good example of what we recommend because, in fact, it's implemented in the strategy. And for the next slide, the same in German strategy. It was presented very recently. So the priority given to a living lab project. That means that a living lab is a project with the whole ecosystem, production and usage, and it's supposed to shall bridge the gap between demonstration and market, and it must be regional, holistic, and scalable. So we see that it's the same thing. We could also call it Hydrogen Valley, but proven that the size is good, and we see that we recommend to implement this type of project in the national strategy. On the next slide. So to finish my presentation, we propose 4 recommendations. So first, as I mentioned before, to propose a selective approach to select the new demonstration project. So selective approach to focus on non-mature technology like a solid oxide electrolyzer, for example. Second recommendation, to establish and organize a permanent knowledge platform to share the knowledge and information and data provided by the demonstration project. And probably, of course, it must be at an international level, especially to facilitate the transfer between European countries and countries where the demonstration are not so present. Third recommendation, to promote joint demonstration facility platform. So it's a more facility with experimental facilities open to international collaboration. We can imagine 1 or 2 in Europe and others in other continents. The idea is to reach a critical mass in terms of technical expertise application, to optimize funding, and also to be flexible enough to allow different experimentation, and to facilitate, of course, technology transfer and to emerging countries, for example. And last, the last recommendation is to develop a guideline for public stakeholders. It's just a slide before. We have no time enough in the task to develop a comprehensive guideline report, but it could be another task able to develop these guidelines, to integrate the criteria, the metrics, how to fund a demonstration project, etc., and what is recommended. So I finish my presentation now, and thank you very much. And of course, I am open to question. You will find all the details in the report you can upload from today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the presentation. I would like to highlight that this will be available at the website in the blog entrance that we are about to post, either tomorrow or on Monday. So you can, all of attendees could check out the PDF presentations that were shown today, not only this one, but all of them. So right now, we would like to go to the next point of the agenda, that are strategic activities tackling PTX on the International Energy Agency and the hydrogen TCP. So I will start sharing the screen again. And I welcome back our colleague José Bermúdez from the International Energy Agency to present the International Energy Agency part. So José, please unmute yourself, put your camera on, and let me know.
Yeah. Sorry, Marina, I was finishing to reply to Herif, so that already took a bit more. So if you can then go for the next slide. Okay, perfect. So I have already given you a little taster of things that are on the pipeline, but I think if we think about only this slide and all the reports that are named here, which came basically from last year and this year, so only in the last 2 years, you can see how the IEA has take a step forward in the analysis and the work that we do on hydrogen. And obviously on all this work, we rely a lot on the input, technical and academic input from the hydrogen TCP, which is an unbelievable pool of experts and really provide amazing insights on the work that we do, particularly on the technology side. So starting from last year, we published again our energy technology perspectives, which is I will say the equivalent of WEO, although less famous than the World Energy Outlook, but is equivalent from the perspective of the energy technologies. So we do analysis on more than the 800 technologies and technology designs. And we assess which is the role of all these technologies in the clean energy transition. And actually, after more than 3 or 4 years, I think it was since the last time that we published, we realized that we needed to prepare a second special report concretely on the need of clean energy innovation and how we need to accelerate innovation on these clean energy technologies if we really want to deliver our objectives of climate neutrality. Then this year, well, late last year, we published the tracking clean energy progress on the hydrogen page, which is what I was just replying to Herif on the chat, and this is an effort that we do every year to inform basically the clean energy ministerial discussions about which is the status of a series of more than 40 technologies that we consider critical for the clean energy transition, and one of them is hydrogen. And in both of these reports, the input of the hydrogen TCP was really important. I think if I can flag one single thing, is our current hydrogen project database. It has been expanded a lot in the last few years, but it was born under the TCP, and the TCP made the first step and the first effort to put this in place, and now it has become a critical asset for our work. Then already in this year, we recently published a report on the role of critical minerals in the clean energy transition and flagging how energy security is not anymore only about the supply of energy vectors, but it's also about other things and particularly critical minerals. So it can be a major issue from the energy security perspective on geopolitics and the supply of these critical minerals needs to be addressed for the future of this energy transition, and for assessing concretely the impact on power to X technologies and on fuel cell technologies. The hydrogen technology collaboration program provided impressive inputs and at a very short notice, which is something that I would like also to flag, because we are always on the rush at the IEA, and the hydrogen TCP is always responsive, which is something that we are really grateful. Obviously, these inputs were critical to deliver the net zero emission roadmap in May, and will be as well on the global hydrogen review, as I mentioned, on the update of the tracking progress, on the clean energy technology guide, and also on another report that we have on the pipeline, which is about low carbon fuels in power generation, and this includes obviously hydrogen, but it includes ammonia as well. And on all these reports, we plan to keep in contact with the hydrogen TCP to get more insights from this amazing pool of experts, and in any other things. So these are major reports that we are going to be published, but at the end we try to keep a constant flow of outputs from the IEA in form of short commentaries or articles, where we plan to keep building on our collaboration with the technology collaboration program. And well, Marina, over to you to discuss also the activities from the hydrogen TCP.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jose, for your presentation. As my colleague Andrea put in the chat, here in the slide, if you click, you will be able to access the IEA website for each of these reports. Either way, we will be putting this as PDF with the links in the blog entrance that we are preparing. So you will have all the information out there for a late checkout after this. So going on with the strategic activities on PTX, on the hydrogen TCP, as task 38 close, we have a kind of successor task that will be task 41, tackling data and modeling. So task 41 is developing an updated and updatable database with the main numbers for hydrogen to fuel the energy modeling systems. So they have some subtasks, as Paul introduced at first, how we in the hydrogen TCP organize the work is through topical international working groups that we call tasks, and these tasks normally are divided in subtasks. So in the case of task 41, we have a subtask for data consolidation, another one for how to model hydrogen in the value chain that is currently working on a paper on the taxonomy of models for investigating hydrogen energy systems, and another one for collaboration with the IEA HQ and ETSAP, TCP specialized in modeling. So, and they have another subtask to help the hydrogen TCP and the IEA review reports, such as the reports that Jose just mentioned. So this actually increases our ability to respond, as Jose said, with a high network, a broad network of experts, not only from the executive committee, but also at the task level. So aside from this task 41, we are right now with the task in definition on renewable hydrogen production that we hope that will be released or that will kick off very soon at the end of this year on, as I was saying, renewable hydrogen production that will have a subtask on electrolysis. So more important things and technology R&D will be discussed in this subtask, as well as other ones that we are exploring right now, as hydrogen export value chains or the hydrogen value chains to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors that mentioned Sila in the roundtable, or hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels production from wind and PV that we are trying to coordinate with the other TCPs, so wind TCP and PVPS TCP. I will encourage all of you, if you're interested in PTX, if you're interested in any of these topics, to look in our website for more information or reach out to us in our emails. I will put it in the chat, although you have been seeing it in the presentations, but I will put my email in the chat. So if you have any questions on potential strategic activities that we are tackling in the hydrogen TCP on PTX or other topics, do not hesitate to reach out and ask. So this will conclude the presentations for today, and we will open the second round of questions and answers. I will stop presenting now. I will give Paul again access as presenter so he can answer questions. Okay, and I've seen here that Jose, as you were mentioning, Harry asked you, and you have already answered both in this presentation and through the chat. And I see that Sila asked Paul, and he briefly answered as well, but I will ask you, Paul, to please extend a little bit more on this question, that how do we shorten the time from demonstration to commercialization, and who do you think will lead this, industry or the government?
Yes, so I mentioned that we need all value chain project now, and of course, in some country you have this type of project, but it must be the priority, and with public support, because the cost of hydrogen is too costly now, as we all of us mentioned. And so, but it's different mechanism from the direct support of hydrogen production cost. But we need to have this type of project, which I don't think I can call it demonstration project. I prefer to put it in the early stage of commercialization or a living lab. You know, there is a lot of words to describe this type of project, but it's not demonstration project. It's a project fully integrated in the ecosystem, selling hydrogen for a long period, but with a public support and with a scale. You see, for example, for the Danish call for project, the scale is about 100 or 200 megawatt. So it's not so small, and it could lead to a very interesting feedback after that. And for me, it's intermediate step before or at the same time of a massive production project.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Can I have your opinion on this, Jose? What do you think would it take to shorten the time from demonstration to commercialization?
Yeah, thanks, Marina. I consider so many things with Paul that I may repeat myself, but I think he has flagged something important. I think we are not at demonstration level anymore. So the technologies are demonstrated. It's a matter of scaling up. And for that, definitely public support will be needed. I think we need to put policies in place. And I think this is already happening. So if we see how things are going around the world, I think someone in the chat has just mentioned a program in the Netherlands. We are aware of a program in Denmark as well. The important projects for common European interest in the EU. The Chilean government has put in place a program for collaborating between institutions and public institutions and companies to identify those projects that can be the first ones to be deployed. Australian government. So we are seeing things all around the world. As these different programs start morphing, things should be accelerated. And I think another important thing to put here on the table is the impressive support for hydrogen and from clean hydrogen technologies that the different recovery programs from the national governments have been put in place. So I think these kind of things can really accelerate. And I think it's also the moment of start thinking about other things, not only scaling up, but on the building of the business cases. And try to be creative, if we can say, on the business cases. Try to find certain applications where an electrolyzer can make a difference. And I think a clear example are industries that at the same time may need hydrogen and oxygen that normally is produced from air separation, which is costly and energy intensive. So if part of that can be replaced with the oxygen that is produced in the electrolyzer, it's an additional bit for the business cases. As Paul mentioned, the we are seeing more and more projects connected to the grid. So try to participate in green balancing mechanisms. Try to explore these new business cases that can facilitate. So the production of hydrogen will still be expensive, but this additional bit to the business case can help on closing this gap and to have additional inputs. So we are not so dependent only on the public money.
Perfect. Thank you, Jose. I see that Sila had another question for you. You have partly answered with this, but she would like to know what is IEA's view in terms of balancing market versus regulation to create long-term conditions to encourage investments in PTX.
So I think that's definitely a possibility, and we are already seeing some projects that see more of a business case on grid balancing and this balance market than on the production of hydrogen and selling of hydrogen itself. So I think this is an area that we will be seeing more and more. But there are regulatory barriers on that front yet, and we have seen other balancing markets failing before, not only for electrolyzers, but also, for example, in the case of batteries and other storage technologies. So I think it's important to define a strong balance market and strong policies on that side as well that can secure and not create more uncertainty on the business case. Obviously, all these things will be strongly linked to the climate ambitions of each country or region. If we see the role of hydrogen that we see, the one that we see on the net zero emission report is particularly impressive when we compare it with other optimistic scenarios, the sustainable development scenario. So the faster that we want to move and the faster that we want to deploy renewables, more balancing that will be needed, and a larger role for hydrogen could be on for PTX in general that could be there.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jose, and thank you all for your questions. We have the last one before we go to the closing remarks. So, what's the outlook for hydrogen activities under the Clean Energy Ministerial Initiative?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So the activities on the Clean Energy Ministerial, we have struggled for a long time. Well, not for a long time really, but when we came up with the first work plan, the pandemic breakout came up and practically stopped everything. Fortunately, especially in the last 6 months, we have seen activities going up and the country's been much more involved. And we have just recently launched the Global Ports Coalition, which has been one of the major milestones of the year. So we have put together more than 30 ports around the world, and we have already received interest for another 10 or 12 ports more to join and to collaborate. So I think this is going to be one of the big tasks on the next few months. We are expecting to launch soon as well the Hydrogen Twin Cities activity, where we aim to do something similar as we have done with the Global Ports Coalition, but trying to put in contact and to collaborate municipalities or regionalities all around the world to also make the public aware of which could be the role of hydrogen in the urban environment. So this is another activity that we are working on it. And another activity that we have already quite active is on tracking policies and ambitions from governments around the world, and this will actually feed directly on the Global Hydrogen Review, and this will be presented there. So these are the activities that are definitely ongoing. Next week we have the next advisory group meeting, and we think that more activities may come up from this advisory group, because other initiatives from the Clean Energy Ministerial, like the investment and finance or carbon capture and storage and utilization, have already expressed interest on setting activities with the hydrogen initiative. So we expect activities to move ahead, and concretely in collaboration with the hydrogen TCP, because this is another area where we are trying to explore collaboration with the hydrogen TCP. We expect like the other activities that are ongoing on maritime applications, hopefully on mining applications, and on large-scale supply chains, which is much more broader than the clean hydrogen and the clean ministerial or the hydrogen TCP. This will involve the IPHE as well, and knowing that Herif has put a question, I hope Marina as well soon. We are expecting these activities to start accelerating soon, but I invite you to attend to the next advisory group and to contribute and to propose activities, because I think the group is really willing to explore potential new activities and to put them in place as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jose. And without further ado, I will give the floor to the Hydrogen TCP Chair, Paul Lucchese, for the closing remarks of the workshop. And on my side, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today in this joint workshop for Power to Hydrogen and Hydrogen 2X. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marina. And just before closing the workshop, just to clarify again, I think the public support could address 3 different things. First, demonstration project, but proven that it is low TRL or or innovative technology like high temperature electrolyzer. Second, all value chain project integrated in the complex ecosystem, typically 100, 200 megawatt. And third, support incentive mechanism to compensate the gap between the production cost with renewables compared to the market price. For massive production. You know, I wanted just to clarify the 3 level of public support we need for the next decade. Okay, so thank you very much. And this workshop is closing all the work we achieved since 5 years now. And thanks again to our CEA Institute, ITZ, and to all the people contributing. And I think it was a very interesting task, because we had a lot of meetings, we have a lot of exchange, human contact, and it was always with a friendly atmosphere. And I think we must follow this type of organization for the future task, and it will attract a lot of people also. So thank you very much. We have now report. We have probably over output, and so I wish you good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And I hope to see you again physically. I hope in our future works. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all. Please keep posted for the blog entrance, where you will have all the materials available, as well as the recordings for this workshop. And you can check out the roadmap right now in the website of the Hydrogen TCP. Thank you all and goodbye. Thank you for joining.